with breaking news where Mexico has agreed to deploy 10,000 troops to the U.S.-Mexico border in exchange for a one-month delay on President Trump's tariffs. The deal comes just days after President Trump announced 25% tariffs on both Mexico and Canada, as well as 10% tariffs on China. It's yet another reminder that leadership matters most when the stakes are highest. And a reminder that President Trump is doing exactly what he said he was going to do. Here's friend of the show, Hogan Gidley, laying it all out. Watch.
Always says they want free and fair trade. The free trade always comes. It's the fair trade that never follows. Donald Trump changed that 4 years ago when he was in the White House. You're seeing more of that in this term. He wants the American people to benefit. You'll see a common theme. It's putting the American people first. And only in Washington, D.C. would it be a novelty where someone runs on an issue, wins on an issue, and then actually does what they say they were going to do. Donald Trump is solely focused on making sure that the fentanyl, the deaths, the human trafficking, the child smuggling, the rapes, the murders, the illegal immigration stops. And if Canada and Mexico need tariffs as a lever of incentive and influence to bring them to the table to help stop that, Donald Trump is going to do it.
Well, and that's not all. The CEO of the largest steel producer in the U.S. endorsed President Donald Trump's tariffs on China, Canada, and Mexico. And President Trump said earlier today that China better address the fentanyl crisis or the tariffs are going up even more. And at our southern border, their crossings are down, believe it or not, 93% since Biden left office. And we even have our military, including U.S. Marines, fortifying our security measures. And joining me now, iconic filmmaker and author Dinesh D'Souza. Thank you so much, Dinesh, for being on the program.
Kim, it's my pleasure. Great to be with you.
All right, fantastic. So I'm pretty excited, and I'm very optimistic. A lot of wonderful things that have been most auspicious have occurred since President Trump took office and was sworn in. So much has happened, in fact, in a matter of just weeks. What stands out to you from President Trump's actions in the first few weeks of his presidency?
Well, I think the most astounding thing is the blitzkrieg fight on all fronts moves so quickly that just when the left is gearing up to oppose one thing, something else even bigger comes down the pike. Years ago, I wrote a short biography of Reagan, and I made the point that Reagan was a man of priorities. He would identify 2 or 3 really big things that needed to be done, but he would let the rest of it go. He would focus on the Cold War, he'd focus on reducing taxes, but there were lots of bad things happening around them. And Reagan's view was, we can't fix the world. You can't change the world in 40 ways. You can change the world in 2 or maybe 3 ways. Well, Trump disagrees with that. Trump feels that we can change the world in 40 ways. We just have to have good people, enough energy, and kind of go to it. So the sheer kind of passion and focus with which this is being done on so many different fronts, it's just downright dizzying. I've never seen anything like it.
No, you're absolutely right. I love the phrase, blitzkrieg, lightning warfare, right? So we're really seeing him take aim, at the core rod inside our government in ending open borders, okay? Stopping these lavish government contracts and expenditures to left-wing groups and exposing just how corrupt this whole cabal really is. You have been covering these exact issues and subject matter for decades, that you have exposed, that you have identified, and that you've called out to bring an end to. What is it like to actually observe in real time and see your work turning into action?
Kim, I don't see it that way. I mean, I'm delighted to have played a role in opening people's eyes. I think there are 3 big areas that are being attacked simultaneously. So let me identify them. One of them, of course, is the border. It's all the fentanyl. It is the criminal elements that have come across the border. So that is a huge area. And that's really what's the centerpiece of the campaign. And to some degree, that's the most predictable. The second one is attacking the waste, fraud, and abuse in the government. This is huge because our government has been run like a racket, really for decades. in which bureaucrats do nothing. They feed money to their own favored groups and so on. And all of this is going on at just an absolutely sickening scale. And people are aware of it, but people feel a certain kind of helplessness in dealing with it. I think for the first time now, this problem is being tackled head on. And the third is the dismantling of the police state. This is something that has acquired terrifying power. It was deployed to an unprecedented scale by Biden and Harris in the last 4 years. Many ordinary Americans have seen helicopters over their heads and FBI battering rams through their front doors. I mean, this was taking us down an Orwellian road toward a full-blown police state and needs to be stopped in its tracks. And it's just wonderful to see that it looks like that is exactly what is going on.
Yeah, for sure. And President Trump, of course, is taking direct aim at DEI, and the left is melting down over it. Why is the left's identity so wrapped up in DEI politics?
Because classic socialism is something that the left gave up on decades ago. In the middle of the 20th century, you would find left-wing socialists in the Democratic Party. They were never the mainstream in the party, but they were basically straight-out Marxists, the rich against the poor, the working man against the capitalist bosses, and so on. Starting in the 60s and 70s, the left modified this, in which they said that the new proletariat are the blacks, the Hispanics, the Native Americans, the women. So they adopted what I have called identity socialism. It's like the marriage of identity politics and socialism. So this is built into their political identity. And so, you know, when you have all this stuff like these airline mishaps and so on, the left goes, well, you know, can you prove with Euclidean certainty that this particular person who crashed the plane was a DEI hire? Well, we don't have to do that. When you lower standards in an industry and mishaps occur, it's very reasonable to blame the lowering of the standards. It's kind of like if you lower the standards on a football team and your team starts losing, you don't have to prove that the reason this guy dropped the ball is he was a DEI. No, you have basically gotten away from what it is that makes a football team effective. No wonder you're losing games. That's the problem.
No, you're absolutely right. It was interesting to see some of the images where you have them painting over all the DUI stuff in the FBI, the walls that talked about all the diversity, equity, inclusion, et cetera, and also removing pronouns from any of the government employees, like header or footer or signature line. What do you make of that?
Well, it just kind of shows you the craziness that got way out of hand. I think what happened with Biden, it's almost like you had a guy who was himself sort of asleep at the wheel. I think as long as Biden was getting his family checks from Ukraine or Russia or wherever he was getting them through the family, he was perfectly delighted to have all these left-wingers running the place. And they were running, these are the people who were opening up the border. These are people lavishing government grants on their friends. These are the people who everybody got to play with their own pet peeve. So one guy pushed the pronouns, another guy, transgender week and so on. And there was no end to all this stuff. So, I thought it might take a long time to peel the layers of this onion back. But I think that the forcefulness of Trump in the opening of this 2025 term is just downright amazing, because I think they've decided, listen, we're not going to be doing this kind of gradual surgical removal of all the bad stuff. We're going to go in with a bulldozer and we're going to bulldoze these places. We'd rather fire everybody and then rehire the good people rather than spend, let's do an audit for the next 4 years and then we'll identify all the people who aren't doing their jobs. No, fire them first and then rehire the good ones.
It's an interesting approach, but it sounds like it's one that you were in favor of and probably thought of as well, about how to handle it, because otherwise you're right. It could be too laborious and time consuming to be able to figure it all out. And in the meantime, you're losing precious time at being effective and putting the people in that you want.
Yeah, you've got to call these people on their BS. I mean, recently, I think just today, one of these senators, I think from Connecticut, he says, hey, you know what? I've got an illegal living in my garage. Come get her. Well, we got to go get that person. And it might even be giving this guy a citation for obstructing or for colluding with her, because these people are used to this kind of performative defiance, and they're used to Republicans running scared, and they're used to getting away with it. Well, for the first time really in a number of years, really perhaps going back to the Reagan years, these guys are not getting away with it. They're the ones suddenly running scared. I think Elon Musk is tying them up in knots, because by bringing all these geeks into the government, and these guys understand spreadsheets, software, passwords, the left is not used to us fighting them by outwitting them on the bureaucratic side. They're used to ideological wars where we say one thing, they say another thing. But getting into an office, working 120 hours a week, moving some beds in there, and closing out their passwords, this is just too much fun to behold.
Oh my gosh, that's for sure. Can you imagine? They're like, what?
What happened? I'm locked out of my account.
God, I thought I had, a cushy job for life being a weirdo. All right, you wrote a book over a decade ago called What's So Great About America? When you look back to the point when you actually wrote it, to what we're seeing now from President Trump, what stands out to you?
What stands out to me is just a genuine sense that we are getting America back. When I first heard the slogans about Make America Great Again, I thought to myself, well, this is not going to be easy. And the reason is that many of the things, I once wrote an essay called 10 Great Things About America, and I tried to identify 10 things about America that you would not find anywhere else in the world. American exceptionalism, things that made America unique. And then I went back recently and looked over this toward the end of the Biden years, and I said, there are only about 4 of these things that are still true, meaning 6 of them are already gone. And if we let the other guys stay in power, all 10 will be gone pretty soon. So getting them back is not going to be an easy task. But again, the determination, and it's not just Trump. I see an equivalent fanaticism, if I can use that word positively, on the part of the cabinet appointees, on the part of guys like RFK, Elon Musk, and others. Almost this sense that we are given one chance to put this back together. And if we don't do it now, it's never going to happen. So it is the ferocity of people who have realized that this is the time to save your country. And they're going about it with that kind of determination.
Well, your recent book and movie, Vindicating Trump, hits on some of these same themes. And I'm wondering if sort of, the ultimate vindication is the actual success of the second administration itself.
It is, and yet the motivation for tackling things with this kind of verve and determination does come from the persecution. I'm thinking back, for example, to a movie like Mel Gibson's The Patriot, in which if you look at the poster, you think, this guy is going to be motivated by the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. No, he's motivated by the fact that they're coming after him. They're ruining his family. They're destroying his life. And I think when President Trump experienced this directly, FBI raid on Mar-a-Lago, use lethal force if necessary, guys. He realized that this is something where he had a firsthand sense that your survival itself is at stake. These people are trying to lock you up for life. And that's going to bring you into a fight with a whole different attitude than if you were merely engaged in some kind of debating society or philosophical struggle. This is a whole different battle altogether.
Well, and when you look at this new MAGA coalition, right, and some of the fresh, new faces in Congress and inside the executive branch, how is this so different from Republican administrations of the past that you've studied?
Republican administrations that I've seen, by and large, have seen it sort of this way. The bad guys come in, the Democrats, and they do a lot of bad things. We come in and we essentially do nothing for 4 years. We hold the line.
Right.
We prevent things from getting worse. And then, of course, we are replaced by the bad guys, and then they do bad stuff again. So Republicans are nothing more than essentially postponements of the deterioration and decline of our society. They're not actively fighting. In fact, they proudly tell you things like, well, I really don't like being in government. I prefer to be in the private sector. So they have this kind of reluctant attitude toward mastering the art of governing, which is what government is. I think what's different now is you've got people who, maybe they've done well enough in the private sector, or maybe they've accomplished their goals, but they're like, listen, we're going to single-mindedly devote ourselves to fixing this country, and we'll actually work harder than we did in the private sector. And we are not motivated by money. We're not motivated by power. We're motivated ultimately by creating a better framework for Americans to thrive over the next 20 years and beyond.
Well, I love this. And I would just really like to, kind of a two-part question, but one, what would you like to see happen next? There's been a tremendous amount of activity, very positive, very quick on execution on all of it. What do you think we need next? Or it can be a few things that you would like to see happen. And again, this is based on your experience and your analysis of how the government in previous administrations and what we need now.
Bill Kristol, the Never Trumper, recently tweeted out that the deep state is far preferable to the Trump state. Now, why would he say that? It's worth thinking about. And the answer is that it's really fun to deploy the police agencies of government against your enemies. And you never begin to feel that that is a bad thing to do unless it happens to you. In other words, unless it's turned around.
Right.
Unless we do to them what they've been doing to us. So I'm not actually talking about just some kind of mindless campaign of vengeance. On the contrary, I'm talking about real accountability. Now, we've seen a modicum of that with the 51 intelligence officers, losing their clearances. But that is hardly, penalty enough for what they did. I mean, these people basically tried to fix the 2020 election.
It's insane. They should be in
jail. They were trying to steal the entire country, basically.
Literally. Steal democracy.
And to an extent they did. So my point is, I think it is very important that some of the leading perpetrators of the rogue scams of the last 4 years, terrible scams that have ruined lives, put people in jail, violated people's civil liberties, this kind of thing, there needs to be some powerful symbolic and accountability. And some people need to be made examples of. I think this will go further than anything else in preventing this kind of thing from happening before. Because think of it this way. If they get to abuse the police powers of government against us, and then we come in and we say, we're going to just pursue neutrality, then they go, look, there's no penalty for what we did. Those guys can do neutrality, and we'll keep doing it when we come back into power. It's only when they see that they too can play at this game, then they realize, well, guess what? We can shut down their free speech, but they can shut down ours. We can lock them up, but guess what? They can lock us up. That kind of, I think, rational fear is what's going to discourage the Democrats from doing this kind of stuff ever again.
No, absolutely. So, and what has been your favorite thing thus far that you've seen President Trump do? If you can have a favorite, I mean.
Well, I think that, this is a very novel thing. I'm going to talk about this on my podcast tomorrow, is the way that Trump uses tariffs not in the way that economists normally think. Economists think of tariffs as some kind of an economic tool, and therefore they analyze it purely in those terms. You have a tariff, I have a tariff, it's a trade war, that's no good. What Trump is doing is he's using tariffs as a kind of diplomatic leverage. Like, listen, you're sending criminals over the border. I'm going to put a tariff on your products. You're not going to like that, are you? Well, maybe you'll stop sending those criminals over the border, and then we'll put a pause on the tariffs or withdraw them. That's a whole different use of tariffs that a lot of these economists have no comprehension of because it falls outside the economic arena. It's tariffs being used as a political tool, not exclusively as an economic one.
Interesting. And by the way, you have to have come on, some basic, intelligence to be able to understand that. It's not just don't look at it in economic terms, look at it as they actually would feel the impact, and it serves as a deterrent for their bad behavior, whether it's, refusing to take their own citizens back, cooperating, with us and with the United States. And if everyone remembers, and you and I are, students of American political history, that it worked last time when President Trump was in office. And he's taking it again and using it. It's straight out of his playbook, but it actually works. And he really means it.
And the tariffs, I think, Kim, are part of a bigger picture, which is to say, look, Trump didn't threaten to do tariffs against Panama. But what he threatened to do was take back the canal unless the Panamanians decided to kick the Chinese out. Guess what? They've agreed to kick the Chinese out. So you can see here that Trump is in his sort of transactional way, employing tariffs as one tool among many. And I think we'll see as he deals with, as he deals with the Middle East, as he deals with Zelensky and Putin, we're going to see Trump bring the whole arsenal of tools available to him. This is the art of the deal, but the art of the deal is much bigger than tariffs. Tariffs are one part of that.
Well, that's certainly it. I think, and he's quite adept at it. He's a very efficient, effective, utilizing this, as a tool in his diplomacy on behalf of the American people and the America First movement. So I'm looking forward to more of this. And again, these are very quick, results that he's been able to deliver on. I really do believe he knows he's got one term. He is literally going to make the most of every single day and not hesitate to effectuate positive outcomes for the American people. And I really love what he's doing, as it relates to the border and national security, as well as Tom Holman. So far, so good, because I think this is incredibly important that we move very aggressively, clean up this country, because there are a lot of bad actors that slip through an open and porous border, and that is a serious threat to national security.
The other point, if I may, Kim, is just that we're beginning to see something that we saw in the Reagan years. It's very refreshing to see a cultural shift that accompanies the political shift. So sometimes you can make all kinds of policy changes, but you're not changing the vibe of the country. And so, you have conservative policies, but the country continues to be very bohemian, and you continue to have all this trans stuff going on. But I think what's happening is that we're beginning to see a vibe shift. Look at the people even who are now defending DEI and how silly they look. Even the people who are protesting the pardons of the January 6th defendants, notice that they didn't say, there was an insurrection just like the Civil War. Instead, they go, well, guess what? Why did you pardon this guy? He's the most violent of all these guys. And, he swung a baton at the So the moment that you begin to admit that the vast majority of January 6th defendants were not violent, and your only argument now is against these three guys who you think were on the extreme end, it kind of shows that you're on the defensive. And that's what Trump has done, is culturally he has put the left on the defensive. And what that means is that the country can begin to see a healing even on the cultural side.
Yes, I'm excited about this. It's very, very good. I'm always excited too, when my producer gave me the good news that we got Dinesh today. So tell everyone where they can buy all your great books and listen to your podcast. Take it away.
The podcast is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast. I do it on audio and video, just the usual places: Apple, Google, Spotify. It's on video on YouTube and Rumble. And then my movies are available all over the place. And Vindicating Trump is actually, I put it for free up on X, so you can find it on my X feed. X is the fun place to be these days. So much is happening on that platform. It's virtually made the rest of the media obsolete.
It's really true. I love it. It's so fun and fascinating to see. And by the way, wait, as a last aside, I really love what President Trump and Elon did with Doge and with USAID, all the above. Oh my gosh. Unbelievable.
Again, part of it is just going into the rat hole and enumerating all the horrible stuff these people are doing, which is indefensible. And then the best the left can do is go, who gave Elon Musk the authority? Well, the answer is the American people did, because the American people elected a president. That's Trump. Trump has deputized Elon Musk to perform some of these executive functions. And so far from this being some sort of attack on democracy, it is an expression of democracy at work.
An expression of democracy at work. There you go. The iconic, the one and only, the great one, Dinesh D'Souza. Thank you so much for your time. We really enjoyed it.
Always a pleasure.
All right, be well. And we have much more to come on all of this. Every day is a Trump news cycle. But first, free speech is under attack. But Rumble refuses to back down. We've got a fearless leader in Chris Pavlovsky. We have always believed in empowering independent voices. And now Rumble is taking that issue to the next level. We're excited to offer Rumble Premium, a completely ad-free experience with exclusive benefits for viewers and for Rumble creators like myself. And it's more than a subscription. It is a stand, taking a position for free speech. Your voice matters. You like the sound of that? Then join Rumble Premium. For a limited time, you can get $10 off an annual plan using promo code KG10. I like that. KG10. So just visit rumble.com/premium/KG10, okay? Rumble.com/premium/KG10, and you can claim your discount today. Again, rumble.com/premium/KG10. And I also want to bring you a special message from Patriot Lifestyle, where you can save more and spend less on a whole host of different lifestyle benefits, from savings on travel, identity theft, legal services, and even pet care. Take a look. Kimberly Guilfoyle here, and I'm so excited to introduce the Patriot Lifestyle Benefits Program. With our benefits program, you get a range of lifestyle benefits at an affordable price, so you can save money and stay secure. For example, as a member, you will access exclusive discounts with NB Cash Back, so you can save more on your everyday expenses like groceries, restaurants, and even auto services. And with NB Travel, you can experience more but spend less by enjoying deep discounts on flights, hotels, entertainment, and so much more. These benefits are available to you and your immediate family to use anytime, anywhere. We also offer identity theft protection, so you can stay on top of any unauthorized, fraudulent, or illegal activity. And access free and discounted legal services, so you can protect your rights and receive top legal advice without breaking the bank. Plus, enjoy peace of mind on the highway with our roadside assistance program. And even take care of your furry friends with discounts on pet food, toys, medicine, grooming, and even trips to the vet. Our program is designed specifically for America First patriots like you, who understand the importance of letting your dollars reflect your values and supporting companies who support you. And the best part of all of this, our benefits are at below market prices, so you can enjoy all of them while living the Patriot lifestyle to the fullest. So don't miss out. Visit our website at patriotbenefits.net. That's patriotbenefits.net. Thank you again for choosing the Patriot Lifestyle Benefits Program, where real benefits and real savings are our top priority. Join us today and start saving now. And you can go to patriotbenefits.net to learn more, because these programs all come at an extraordinary value and they will greatly improve your life. Now we continue our coverage of President Trump's bold and decisive America First efforts, including new efforts to combat wasteful and corrupt spending inside the office of USAID. I mentioned this earlier. It's a powerful move, similar to what Elon did with Twitter, taking it over and making it X. The office will now be moved under the purview of Secretary of State Marco Rubio, as the Trump administration makes it clear that business as usual is over, folks. It's over. Here's Secretary of State Rubio laying it all out. Watch.
Yeah, there are things that USAID, that we do through USAID, that we should continue to do, and we will continue to do. But everything they do has to be in alignment with the national interest and the foreign policy of the United States. And the attitude that USAID has adopted over the years is, no, we are independent of the national interest. We fund programs irrespective of whether it's aligned or not aligned with the foreign policy. That's ridiculous. These are taxpayer dollars. Every penny that we spend in foreign aid needs to be in furtherance and aligned with the national interest and the foreign policy of the United States. So this is not about ending the programs that USAID does per se. There are things that it does that are good, and there are things that it does that we have strong questions about. It's about the way it operates as an entity. And they're supposed to take direction from the State Department, policy direction. They do not. Not only do they not take policy direction, they're completely uncooperative. When you ask questions, when you try to go in and find out, okay, what does this program do? Who's getting the money? Why was this funded? Why are we doing this? Why aren't you coordinating with the embassy or the State Department? Their attitude is, we don't have to answer to you because we are independent. We answer to no one. Well, that's not true. And that was Secretary of State
And joining me now to explain this and so much more, Chief National Initiatives Officer at the Texas Public Policy Foundation, former Army Intelligence Officer, and former California State Representative Chuck DeVore. I mean, wow, what an underachiever.
Great to be with you, Kimberly.
All your accomplishments. Thank you. And we're super excited to have you on the program today. So thank you for taking the time out. Coming from California, like me, you know as much as anyone about wasteful government spending. Talk about how President Trump's efforts to use tariffs to bring these other countries to the table can actually really save us money in the long run and make us more secure.
Well, I think it's really important to understand that there's really three different types of tariffs we're talking about here. I would argue that a lot of those who are critical of the president, frankly, are not being critical with good faith, because what they're talking about, of course, is tariffs in the perfect world where you have friends and allies, everyone governed by rule of law, nobody stealing each other's intellectual property, no one using non-tariff barriers to keep other products out. And in that sort of near perfect environment, which we have kind of sort of had over the years with our friends in Canada or in Western Europe, then what tariffs tend to do is they tend to subsidize inefficient local industry and they prevent kind of innovation. But that's not what we're talking about here. That's not what President Trump has been doing with his tariffs, going back to the tariffs that he levied, especially on the People's Republic of China in his first administration, and then the recent tariffs where he's increased those on the PRC by 10%, and then had these emergency tariffs on both Canada and Mexico. So what are those? Well, those fall into two different buckets. The first bucket with both Canada and Mexico, that's like a slap across the face to get somebody's attention in a negotiation.
Right.
You're holding at risk something very valuable, and you're saying, hey, look, partner, look, neighbor to my north and south, you have to get a hold of your fentanyl trafficking and the illegal immigration coming across our border. These are national security risks.
Correct.
And in fact, it's so important to us, we're going to slap a 25% tariff on it until you change your behavior. So that's completely different than that first example I gave.
Sure.
The third example with China, again, very different. It's a national security issue that our supply chains have been connected to the People's Republic of China. And since Trump's initial tariffs, and those were then, of course, continued under Biden, you've seen a huge shift away from our supply chains in the People's Republic of China to other nations. That's good for America first.
No, absolutely. I totally agree. And you've explained it very well, illuminating, the issue and what is the purpose and the process, behind it. And now, as you said, President Trump is sending, a very strong message to China. Okay. And I think this is very important. And the history behind this. Beijing wants to claim fentanyl is an American problem. Very dishonest, very deceitful. Okay. But we actually know where the drugs are coming from. How do you think President Trump will ultimately hold China accountable? Because at first pass, I don't know if we can expect that they will actually course correct. I want to be very optimistic, but I also, really crave reality and being realistic about the outcomes and the length of time it'll take to effectuate the outcome that we want.
Well, that's the fundamental question, isn't it? And so what ends up happening is you're going to see both China and Mexico, and to a lesser extent Canada, kind of do performative things, saying, well, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And then you have to wait and see if anything really happens. Now, I'm skeptical, as I think you are, that there'll be any fundamental changes. And what they're going to try to do is draw this out. They're going to try to come up with excuses. We're really trying hard. I think it's important that the American people understand, though, that this isn't as simple as fentanyl or the precursor chemicals being shipped to Mexico or now increasingly into the U.S., whether it's manufactured here. What it's also about is very extensive Chinese money laundering operations in America, Chinese illegal marijuana grow operations in America with a distribution network. This is the marriage of Chinese criminal organized crime with the Chinese Communist Party to achieve strategic objectives. They want to weaken America, they want to take as much of our money as they can, and they want to harm us. They want to kill our people, and they've been successful to that regard, killing upwards of 80,000 people a year if you look just at the synthetic opioids alone that have been imported via China.
Well, and this also ties into the efforts by Elon Musk to clean out the rot at USAID. And this has been used for decades by so-called NGOs to do the bidding of Democrats and left-wing causes abroad.
Yeah, yes, it has. And I think it's very important to understand the history of USAID funding. If you look in inflation-adjusted terms and you go back to the middle of the Cold War, it was about 10.2 billion a year compared to today at 28.3 billion. So it's almost tripled in functional size since the middle of the Cold War. Now, interestingly enough, in 2000, just before 9/11, it dipped clear down to 6.2 billion a year, which today, by comparison, that's like 4.5 times the funding today that it was as recently as 2000. So why did it grow? It grew hugely after 9/11 because USAID was the agency through which a lot of the funds were expended to try to rebuild Afghanistan and Iraq in these futile nation-building efforts to try to somehow make them, the 51st U.S. state, somehow equivalent to that. Of course, they were fantastically corrupt. It was a failed experiment. And shockingly, after those experiments were, wound down and ended, the USAID budget kept going up. What the heck are they spending all that money on? And you hinted at it. You have an enormous amount of money as Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and my goodness, that sounds good, doesn't it?
Yes.
You have a tremendous amount of these decisions being made that are contrary to U.S. policy by these bureaucrats that see themselves as completely immune from any executive oversight.
It's insane. I mean, they've gone completely rogue, and they just have felt that they were above everything, above executive branch control or oversight, like you said. And I think that's part of the reason that we saw these numbers, which are quite traumatic in terms of, the aid, et cetera, and the expenditures and the budget, just really getting out of control, spiraling. And that is something, as you know, that President Trump really wants to combat against, and Elon Musk and the whole idea of Doge. So this is, I think, very positive result today and an outcome, especially now with this being under the rubric officially and the umbrella of Secretary of State Marco Rubio. I really feel optimistic that we're going to see this, tightened up. And again, he makes the point, and he's quite articulate about it by saying that there's some very good things that USAID does. But, it doesn't mean that they don't need the oversight. They can keep some of the things, the programs, the expenditures that are important, that are, mission critical, whilst, curbing and cutting back any of the government waste. I mean, at the end of the day, it's government for the people and by the people. Don't we owe them an obligation to make sure that we're spending U.S. tax dollars in the right way, in the most efficient way possible?
Well, absolutely. And some of the things they've done recently are just insane. Like they spent something along the lines of, if I remember correctly, $45 million to teach, basically promulgate the teachings of an Italian Marxist. And you think, it's like, wait a minute, doesn't the rest of the world have enough problems without trying to burden them with Western concepts of Marxism? Really? The U.S. is paying for that with taxpayer dollars? The other thing that's fascinating to me, and I suppose this shouldn't come as a shock, is that the non-governmental groups that USAID has been funneling our billions of dollars of taxpayer dollars to have overwhelmingly, we're talking about 99-1, contributed money to Democrats. Now, again, I guess that shouldn't be a shock because at the federal level, most people who believe in a big and unaccountable federal government do contribute money to one particular party. But it's just amazing to me that you have this massive amount, billions of dollars of federal taxpayer dollars going to these unaccounted programs, and then you see some money then going back into our political process in the form of campaign donations. It's just, if you gave the script to Hollywood, they wouldn't believe you.
They'd reject it. They'd say, this isn't believable. This is too out of control. And it just really makes me so mad because, we have hardworking Americans out there. They are working so hard to be able to provide for their families, et cetera. We tax them to death, okay, into making decisions about their own health care or their children's education or whatever, because they have to make very tough financial decisions, only to have these reckless, irresponsible people with Marxist agendas waste all their hard-earned money. And it's very frustrating to me, and it's got to stop. And this is across multiple agencies and government entities that really need some strict supervision and the belt tightened. Are there some other areas that irritate you, like that probably irritate me?
Well, yeah, I mean, you want to talk about a big one. The
Go
two
ahead.
biggest funders of the gain of function research at the Wuhan labs were USAID and the Department of Defense. I think USAID actually spent a little more than the Department of Defense. I think in the realm of $40–50 million. And again, this was research that initially was banned by none other than Barack Obama, who saw the danger, and then the ban was reiterated and strengthened under President Trump in his first term. And yet these arrogant grant makers and scientists decide not only are they better than the individual who's been elected by all Americans, but they know best, right? As they then subsidize and pass through multiple different pass-throughs to fund research that ultimately killed millions of people around the world and devastated our economy and economies all over the globe.
No, you're absolutely right. And it's such a good word, the arrogance. And it's just, you know who it makes me think of? You know who's the poster boy for arrogance? That Fauci. Unbelievable, who got a pardon at the last second, okay? Unbelievable what we see here and what we've dealt with. And it just makes me so mad when I hear about all of this and, this Wuhan lab and all the lies and the duplicity, that just like played out before our very eyes. And thank God President Trump's back in. I'm really tired of the abuses by China and people in our government being complicit with that and complicit with the CCP. And meanwhile, we see the left, okay, doubling down on their embrace. This is another one of open borders. Did you see this? There was a major protest in Los Angeles over the weekend. I had to keep rewatching because I'm like, this is insanity. With local leaders saying they won't cooperate with ICE. Contrast that to how states like Texas are handling it. This is bananas.
Yeah, so two things about that. First of all, the mayor of Los Angeles, Karen Bass, I know her. I served in the California State Assembly with her, and for a time she was the speaker. And so Karen Bass is someone who took multiple trips to Cuba on behalf of a Marxist group called the Venciermos Brigades, where the intent was to come back to America and teach Marxism to young leaders. I think she made 18 trips to Cuba. Now, so of course she's part of this. Now, interestingly enough, the people who organize these sorts of events on our streets tend to be individuals who've been marked for leadership, and they're part of foreign organizations that back in the Cold War we would consider adversaries. So I can recall just before I moved to Texas, the 2010 May Day parade in Los Angeles. I happened to be in LA for a meeting then, and they were openly carrying banners of violent communist revolutionary groups from Central America. Now, of course, most Americans by 2010 would have no idea what those groups were. As an old Cold Warrior and retired Army intelligence officer, I knew exactly what they were. And I'm like, holy Toledo, are you kidding me? We have the FMLN parading down the Los Angeles streets, openly carrying banners of a militant Marxist organization. Now, what's interesting is the Trump administration, if you're here on a visa, if you have not become a naturalized citizen and you're promoting a violent revolutionary group, guess what? We can deport you, and we should deport you.
Why not? You got to go. That's the bottom line. And let's talk about the Defense Department, too. So we see Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth saying whatever is needed at the border, he is ready to deploy Defense Department resources to help. Talk about what a change in leadership can do. What would you like to see him do? And believe me, I know him, full disclosure, very well. Very close friend and colleague of mine for years at Fox, highly intelligent, and stood up to the challenge when they were trying to go after him. I know he's going to do an incredible job. He works tirelessly, very, very hard.
Yeah, so this is a state change for the Pentagon because for years, the DoD has resisted any effort to use their troops, their specialized equipment, the specialized training that they've had on the border. They do not view that as a national security mission. I view it as one of the most fundamental of national security missions because you're protecting our border from criminal human and drug trafficking cartels who are in league with the Mexican government in this corrupt symbiotic relationship. And they're trafficking death across our borders. They're trafficking modern day slavery across our borders. And so the military has amazing capabilities. It isn't just the logistics that they can provide, the temporary housing to help house people who have been detained on the border, but also things like intelligence and aviation assets and engineering assets. There is so much that the military can do that in the past and during the previous administrations and even going back further, that they have been highly reluctant and resistant to doing. Before I retired from the California National Guard, I was Deputy J1 for the Cal Guard. And as part of that, we were helping plan and execute an engineering support mission for fortifying the border under President George W. Bush around 2006. And of course, the Guard is very much equipped to do that. And you see that in Texas with Governor Greg Abbott doing a wonderful job in supporting adding security to the border, even when President Biden didn't want it.
Exactly.
But what Secretary Hegseth is doing is really stepping up to the plate and taking no excuses, right? He is making this happen because he sees this mission as a vital mission for our national security, and it's being pushed down the food chain, right? But down the chain of command, and so they are executing, and it's a wonderful thing to see.
Oh, it really is. I'm excited about it. And what would you, I'm just curious, like, you know, what's at the top of your bucket list to see happen next that you would love President Trump to take decisive action on?
Well, you've already seen a hint of it with declaring the Mexican drug cartels as foreign terror organizations. And so it's going to be very interesting over the next few months to see how that designation plays out, because it isn't just kinetic. It isn't just military action.
Correct.
There's things that we
Love
can
that
do
word.
financially through the Treasury Department. There's things that we can do to seize assets, to disrupt their communications. And I think it's really important to take it seriously, as well as to understand that the Mexican government is complicit in all of this.
That's
They
correct.
are not an innocent bystanding party.
You're absolutely right. And as a former prosecutor who prosecuted a lot of high-level cases and narcotics and gang cases in Los Angeles DA's office and San Francisco DA's office, I am delighted to see this happening. And I will tell you this, I've had conversations and have studied a lot of the work that President Nayib Bukele, what he's done in, you know, El Salvador with similar classifications and being able to make essentially like a 93%, you know, give or take, change in terms of violent crime, et cetera, with these classifications and putting these individuals in maximum security prisons, really cleaning up, you know, the problem.
Well, and of course, down in El Salvador, they aren't necessarily having to follow what we have with our Bill of Rights and other fundamental rights that our government recognizes for those of us, you know, as individuals. That said, he has done an amazing job cracking down on a very difficult situation with MS-13, this transnational gang that frankly became supercharged because of the back and forth between America and El Salvador. So it shows what's possible. But in cases where you have countries to our south that are not serious about getting a handle on this, then the United States is either going to force them to get serious about it, or is going to have to do some of that work ourselves.
Oh, you're right about that. It's just, you know, just where you have a will, you'll find a way legally and to respect, obviously, our laws and make sure that we can, you know, protect U.S. interests, protect our citizens. And, you know, enough is enough already. It's very dangerous what's going on with these gangs and the cartels and the fentanyl coming in across the border. They're making an awful lot of money. I love the idea. We used to do it at the DA's office with seizing assets. When they would commit crimes and we would take them in. So let's see what happens. I think We've got people that have the stomach for it, you know, and that have the wherewithal to make sure that we can make this happen. But what a pleasure to have you, Chuck. I really appreciate it. We're looking forward to it. We look forward to having you on again and again, time permitting. But thank you for doing this for us today.
My pleasure.
All right, be well. And my closing remarks just ahead, but don't forget about protecting your savings with the Birch Gold Group. With President Trump back in office, you are going to have more money, think about it, in your paycheck and more opportunities to prepare for the future. Birch will take you through the process step by step, answer any questions, and help you convert an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold. And this means you don't have to pay a penny out of your pocket. Count on it. Want to do it? Text KG to 989898. That's KG to the number 989898. And in closing, President Trump is actually keeping his agenda pretty simple. He's doing what he said he was going to do. Promises made, promises kept. Securing the border, protecting American interests at home and abroad, and forcing our other countries to step up or pay the price. It's what we voted for. It's what we, the American people, want, and it's what's best for America's future. Thank you so much for joining us today. And please stay tuned to Rumble for all the very latest breaking news coverage. Don't miss Don Jr.'s big show tonight at